Hello, all everybody. We're going to do a read out loud for our quiz about responses to conflict. So, conflict or crisis. So, that means conflict and genocides. And the first part is some matching. So, what you're going to do is you're going to write in the term in the blank as best you can there. And here's the terms over on this side. So, I'll do the terms first. They are condemn, mediation, sanctions, peacekeeping soldiers, embassies, and complete military takeover. Remember to pause this recording as you're going through so that you can answer the questions. Number one, a country limits trade or access to resources to get another country to change something. Two, a group often associated with the UN, which means United Nations, helps a conflict become more peaceful. They usually they are carrying a few weapons and use minimal force. So they aren't there to fight. Number three, blank, is the act of settling a dispute between two parties. Involves talking it out. Four, the overthrow of a government by a military force which replaces authority in the area. So changing the government by military force. Five, to publicly express a strong disapproval, to call someone out. So saying you don't like something. Six, the headquarters are for representatives serving in a foreign country, normally led by an ambassador, who is a representative to the host country, sometimes closed as a result of conflict. So if the U.S. isn't getting along with a country, they might close this headquarters and say, hey, we're not even going to deal with you anymore. So we think you're doing is bad. So it's the headquarters there. The U.S. has these in Washington, D.C. Well, other countries have these in our capital. We have these in other capitals and other places around the world, almost 300 different places around the world. This might be a good place to pause and make sure you have those first 6 questions done. All right, now for the really grade level stuff. So really important, you only have to do 2 of these readings, okay? So I'm going to give you some hints about which ones I think you should tackle. You should really do whichever ones you think are easiest for you. You have option A about apartheid, option B, conflict in Colombia, communism in Cambodia, option C there, genocide in Rwanda. So I definitely think you should go after maybe genocide in Rwanda since we watched a movie about it and studied it. And then maybe Cambodia or Colombia. So that's I would probably do Colombia and Rwanda, but you can do whichever ones you want. What you're going to do is critique. That means like judge, say if it worked or not. Was it a good idea? Was there a better option? You're critiquing it, right? Like if I critiqued a movie, I would say, well, it was good, but it wasn't a very good action movie. It was supposed to be an action movie. So I might, even though I thought it was a good movie, I have a more subtle approach. So you're not just saying if it's good or bad, you're really digging into what makes it a good or bad response. All right, so response is what happens because of something else. So there's a genocide or conflict happening. Everybody's going to have some sort of response. Even doing nothing is a response. When we say world community, we mean other countries or groups of countries like the United Nations or the Arab League or the African Union. Okay. So success criteria, you got to do 3 things. And I would view this like a checklist. First, you got to say what's happening, the problem. And you can even just start with the problem is. You got to talk about the response. What was the response? And you got to use one of these 6 terms, or I guess you could use more than one. But there's typically going to be one of these 6 terms. So you would say they used embassies. They used complete military takeover. They used peacekeeping soldiers, okay? So that's what you're going to want to make sure you do for this second part. And then 3, this is really your reasoning part. Explain why the action did or did not fix the problem. So like explain, if you just say it did fix it, why do you think it fixed it? If it did not fix it, why did it not? And if it fixed it, well, was it really worth the cost in lives or money or reputation? Was it worth it, the cost? Was there a substantially better way to do it, okay? So that's what you want to focus on. All right, I'm going to read these, and if you just want to skip ahead, you'll probably be able to see in the video for when I highlight in blue here the reading that I'm on. But I suggest maybe listening to them all and then choosing and going back in the recording to which one you want to do. Option A, apartheid in South Africa. In 1948, a small group of white people in South Africa used racist laws. This was called apartheid. Black South Africans, a majority of the population, would be forced to be separate from whites. Contact between the two groups would be limited. Protesters such as Nelson Mandela were jailed for speaking out against apartheid. In 1986, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Japan refused to trade steel and iron products, agricultural products, food, oil, and other natural resources with South Africa. So they refused to trade. These countries said they would trade again if South Africa stopped apartheid. By 1991, apartheid laws were being removed. And by 1994, South Africa became a fully functioning democratic government, free of apartheid. So they let everybody vote, even the black people. Okay? That's apartheid. Option B, conflict in Colombia. In 1964, a rebel group known as FARC started trying to take over the country of Colombia. They kidnapped people and tried to destroy the Colombian government. In 2000, the United States tried to end the conflict by sending in soldiers to help the Colombian government. The rebel group had 25,000 members. 12 years later, the rebel group only had 8,000. Eventually, the two sides agreed to a peace treaty. FARC was allowed to become part of the government, but they had to give up their weapons. Remember to pause this as needed. Option C, communism in Cambodia. In 1975, a communist group known as Khmer Rouge began running the country of Cambodia. In order to control the country, the Khmer Rouge suppressed human rights and committed acts of violence. Cambodians were not allowed to gather outside and have discussions. Also, people in the city were forced to move to the countryside and work more than 12 hours, I think that means a day, on farms. Nearly 2 million Cambodians were killed due to starvation from lack of food, exhaustion for being overworked, or execution because of suspicion of going against the government. The United States President Jimmy Carter publicly declared the Khmer Rouge to be the worst violators of human rights in the world. That's what he said at the time. The United States took no further action due to the recent cost of fighting the Vietnam War. The genocide in Cambodia continued on for several more years. Genocide in Rwanda, option D. As relations between the Hutus and Tutsis became tense and violent, the United Nations sent soldiers into Rwanda. These soldiers with blue helmets were ordered not to use their weapons. They tried to help the two sides avoid violence. As the tension turned into a genocide, 10 UN soldiers were killed. The United Nations pulled out of Rwanda. Only 300 UN soldiers were left for the entire country. Many refugees were murdered in camps that the UN had been protecting. All right, so you're going to look through all those, and remember, you only have to do two. So when you're looking at this one, you're looking at how did the UN respond to that genocide. Here, you're looking at how the US, the United States, responded to this genocide in Cambodia. Here, you're looking at how the US responded to this conflict in Colombia with FARC, F-A-R-C. And for this one, it's a little more confusing. You're looking at how the US, UK, and Japan responded to the apartheid in South Africa. And when you're done with those two responses, you have to do this last question, which is select one of the above scenarios. It can be one of the ones you did already, that's fine, and create an ideal response to the conflict or genocide. So it might be a little bit easier to do one that you think it wasn't solved, or if it was solved, it was just barely. So an ideal response means like a best response. And you're going to want to pick one of these up here. So maybe they used peacekeeping soldiers and they should have used sanctions, right? That's what you're going to be explaining. So I want you to go for that here. So be sure to justify your answer and explain at least 2 reasons why your response would be a better choice. So it's a comparison. So if you're saying they should have used sanctions instead of mediation, sanctions is a better choice because, or however you're arguing. All right, good luck and make sure you ask questions.